Hi, today I'll be going over VAP Quiz 1 review. It's like this. And we'll start with number 1. Number 1 says, Julie is training to swim. Her results are listed below in the graph. And we have this. You could connect these if you wanted. What are the two variables? The two variables will be found on the X and the Y. So the variables will be time in seconds and total number of laps. B, make a table of Julie's data. So if I was going to make a table, I could do it right on here. I would give the same two variables. This is going to be the total number of laps. And this one would be time in seconds. So if I look here, we have I guess I could have flipped it the other way. I have time at 30, laps at 1. So time was 30, lap was 1. Time is 60, laps is 2. Time is 90, laps is 3. Time is 120. Looks like that's not quite 4. So if I do 120, I'm going to say that's maybe 3.8 laps, maybe. Then I have time is 150. And yeah, that looks like it's pretty close to right in the middle, maybe a little bit more than middle. So it's between 4 and 5. I'm going to say it's 4.55. I think it's a little bit higher than half. Then we have time 180, and it's exactly on 5. I have time is 210, and looks like that's exactly in the middle. 5.5. Time is 240, and that looks like it's exactly on 6. Time is 270, and that's just barely over 6. I'm going to say 6.1. Time is 300, and we haven't gone far, maybe 6.3 or 6.4. Time is 330. Looks like that's right in the middle, and that's 6.5. And then we have time is 360, and it looks like maybe 6.6, barely anything. So now I've made my table. I also could have done it horizontally. All right, so we've done this one. We've done this one. Describe in detail the pattern of how the number of laps changes as time increases. So I could look at either one of these, and as she gets started, it looks like she's doing a lap about every 30 seconds. But then we start noticing that it's not moving up by a whole lap and that it's slowing down. And by the end, it takes her 30 seconds, 30 more seconds, 30 more seconds, so a minute and a half to go like a half a lap. So as time is increasing, her speed is slowing down a lot. Her number of laps is definitely slowing down a lot. From Julia's data, estimate the number of laps she did in 45 seconds and 75 seconds. Explain how you made the estimate. So if I go to, oh look, I don't have 45. But 45 is exactly between 30 and 60, so we're going to look exactly between, and we're going to come up, and we're going to look at that. That looks like it's exactly between 1 lap and 2 laps. So I would estimate that she had done 1.2 laps. And you could say, if you're looking at the graph, basically what I did here, or you could look over here and say, at 45 seconds, I'd be halfway between here, and halfway between 1 and 2 is 1.5, or 1.5. At 75 seconds, again, we don't have 75 seconds, but 75 is exactly between 60 and 90. So I could go exactly up, figure out where it is, or again, come over here and say, well, 75 is exactly between these two. Exactly between 2 and 3 is 2.5. for 2.5 laps. Number 2, the table shows some data Rihanna collected while riding her bike. We have time in minutes and distance in miles. What are the two variables? The two variables would be the time, which are minutes, and distance, which are miles. Graph the data on the axis below. All right, so we start with 0, 0. Then we have time is 5 and distance is 1.5. So that would be exactly between 1 and 2. Then we have time is 10, distance is 3. Time is 15, distance is 4.5. Time is 20, distance is 6. Time is 25, distance is 7.6. 7.6, be just above half. Do your best. And then we have time is 30, distance is 9.2. Okay, a little hard to see the difference on the graph. Sometimes you have to look at a table and sometimes it's easier to tell on a graph. In this specific instance, because there's not a great difference, a lot of times the table will be more helpful. But let's look at the questions. In what time periods did Rihanna make the most progress? Well, looking at this, it kind of looks basically the same. So I'm going to look at my table. Between here and here, there's a 1.5 growth. Between here and here, 1.5. Here and here, 1.5. Here and here, 1.5. Here and here, oh, this is 1.6. And here, this is actually bigger. We have 1 would bring you here, so we end up with 1.6 again. So that kind of gives you an idea of how many miles she's riding and within those 5-minute spans. So if the question says, in what time period did Rihanna make the most progress? Well, it would be these two time periods here because she actually increased by 1.6 miles. How does this show up on the table? If you look at the table, again, I would recommend writing it down like this so you can see what the growth actually is. It shows in growth by showing that she went farther within that 5-minute span. And how does it show up on the graph? On the graph, you really can't notice it very much. I would say something along the lines of the difference is so slight that it does not show up on the graph. Now, if this had been a big difference, then your chart, if she'd gone significantly faster and significantly farther within that time period, your graph would change and become a much sharper image, sharper line. So you would say that the line became much steeper. If she had slowed down and gone way slower, then it would show up in the graph by being a much flatter line. So this would be slower and this would be faster. But in the actual example they gave, it's basically a straight line. In what time period did Rihanna make the least progress? So let's look up here. Well, there's no real least. These 4 are all kind of the same. So they would have to be your least. So you would have to list all 4 of those time periods as the least. How does this show up on your table? Again, it shows up because the distance that she went within those time spans were the same and the smallest compared to these. How did it show up on the graph? Again, it doesn't really show up too much in a graph because there's not a huge difference. But and if it had shown up, if there had been a number that was significantly less, it would have been a more flat line. I hope this was helpful, and if you have any other questions before the quiz, please come see me.